Hey, Ben, this time of year, it get a lot of ants, especially in upstate New York here. I had 5 ants move into my house yesterday.
Five ants.
Yep, and today 5 more. So now I have 10 ants.
Yeah,
I couldn't
that
think
was
of
pretty
any good
good.
home.
I was trying to think like, does that include your Aunt Carol and your aunt? Like, and then I was like, no, okay, I didn't know where this was going.
I didn't have any good home inspector jokes, so I'm like, how about a good landlord joke?
Yeah, 10 ants. You're doing okay.
So before the show, I was just saying, and for our listeners, they can't see, but more than anybody I think I know, you vacillate between beard and no beard. Like, I feel like you need to commit to beard life or abandon beard life. You can't climb the mountain, get halfway to the top, and be like, "I'm done, guys," and then like 3/4 of the way you're back with the group. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. There is no group, man. I'm in a league of my own, I guess.
I feel like it's like Jeep life. Like if you're a Jeep owner, you own a Jeep. That's you now.
Yeah, you gotta collect your ducks, and that's just the rest of your life. You committed.
I never understood that. Like, no, like, isn't that supposed to be like the manly thing? Like, you have a Jeep, you take your doors off, you're driving through the mud, and then you trade tiny little rubber duckies with other grown men. Like, what is that? For people that don't know, I was with a friend of mine. He's a good friend of mine. We went out and got a beer. We're riding around in his Jeep. He's got all these like winches and things for hiking and whatever. And then we pull into a next to another Jeep in the parking lot. And the tradition is you leave a little tiny ducky on their windshield, and they leave one for you.
Yeah,
It's called ducking each other.
you get ducked.
I'm like,
That's it.
the
Yeah,
heck?
there's another family I know. They have like a Honda minivan, and they just thought they were cute, so they like lined up. They bought a bunch of ducks and just put them on their windshield, on their dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
And all their Jeep friends were getting upset. Like you can't do that. You're just not allowed to do that. So it was pretty funny. But
We
I,
gotta,
I mean,
we gotta.
I don't have a Jeep. So don't you have a Jeep? You got a Jeep, right?
I do it. I don't do that though.
You've never been ducked.
No, and I'm thankful for that. I've also never worn Crocs as an adult man, so I'm thankful for that too.
So that goes together, like Jeeps and Crocs.
I don't know. The duck
Oh.
thing just maybe goes with the Crocs. I don't know, but we should come up with something as home inspectors, like I moisture metered you. That sounds weird. That didn't work. Like you leave a moisture meter for the other. I microwave tested you. Like I don't know. You got to leave something on other home inspectors' windshields. You know.
That is
Well, after that
awesome.
awkward
Yeah.
introduction, you're back on the show. So it's usually going to be a special episode, and it's our Q3 market outlook for 2025.
Hmm.
And I got to say, we accidentally did our Q2 market outlook a little too early. I think we're
Yeah.
like
It's been a
3 or
kind of a big gap between the two, huh? Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of a
Hmm.
gap, but it's actually good because a lot of stuff has happened since then. And our 2025 market outlook overall that we did in January has kind of played out like 85 to 90% what we thought it was going to.
Hmm.
Market has picked up a little bit, no big swings. Um, but this next half of the year, I think, is going to be the more interesting half. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it seems that way. Looking at, just news in general before I started research for this episode, I thought, oh man, things are not looking good. But overall, it seems like things, I don't know, what would I say? They're stable and slowly growing. There's no like
Yeah.
wild swings at the moment. And I think that's overall, that's good news.
Yeah. So we're going to go over some statistics, but I think you pretty much summarized it there. Is things have stabilized. The average asking price of a home was a little over $400,000, which it has been for a while now.
Hmm.
But the average person has paid under $400,000 for those houses. So there's seller concessions again.
Hmm.
So we went from last year, still the fringes of people skipping inspections, and in some isolated markets, it's still like that.
Hmm.
But that's from CBS News. They see that as a good thing. Prices haven't dropped, but people are literally paying less ultimately for the home.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think nationally they've measured it in like a it's like a 1% increase, which indicates a major, and that's nationally. So obviously each region you're going to see some going up, some going down, but either way it's slowed. We're not having that crazy growth in price that we've seen.
yeah, and last time we talked about Florida a lot. And the reason we talked about Florida a lot is they've become the canary in the coal mine
Hmm.
for the rest of the market. And interestingly, the Florida market for real estate is suffering. For home inspectors, it's becoming a good market again. That's what we look for as an indicator for a good market. So
Hmm.
basically, houses are sitting on the market longer, quite a bit longer. And I have some statistics to share here, but it's a good sign. The longer houses sit, the less money they go for. It allows the housing stock to increase, which we
Hmm.
want, and
Hmm.
then people start buying houses again. The last thing we want is for a big buying frenzy to happen again.
Hmm.
So people are like, oh, if they only lowered the interest rates, not yet. If they lowered it now, we'd
Hmm.
still be stuck in the same position a year from now.
Hmm.
We need the housing stock to build up, more houses than buyers, then interest rates go down, and then we'll enjoy a good 4 or 5 year period of just feasting for home
Hmm.
inspections.
Yeah. Yeah. You said you had some stats there. The one stat that popped out for me is that I guess it's like 44% of all listings now have sat on the market for longer than 60 days.
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
Yeah, that's something. I mean, the value that represents, I guess it's like about $700 billion worth of inventory that's kind of just stuck there, which we haven't had for a very long time.
Yeah. And so the longer it sits there, the better it is for us. So
Hmm.
I don't know what the statistics were before. I don't have those in front of me, but houses were anecdotally sitting on the market for a week or two. And
Hmm.
sometimes they were only there that long just so that they get all the offers in.
Hmm.
It was a madhouse. But the
Yeah.
problem is still houses are overpriced. So
Hmm.
over $400,000 for an average American home that just a decade ago would have been 250,000 maybe.
Hmm.
That hurts the average American family because inflation and all that other stuff haven't caught up to the housing market yet.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. And the inventory problem, that we were progressing at a pretty good clip, but it looks like we've slowed down a little bit again as far as new construction inventory being added. The growth rate, I guess, year on year has now gone down again. So it's going to take a little longer to be able to keep closing that gap with inventory, with new construction inventory anyways.
Yeah. And so going back to the Florida market, the canary in the coal mine, and we'll see this over the years. Some guy might be sitting in Kansas right now or Iowa, and some inspector up in Maine or New York and say, what does this have to do with me? We'll
Hmm.
always find that typically there's going to be a state in the US that starts, and sometimes it'll be a province in Canada, but very, very rarely, almost always a state in the US that starts the process of swinging the market back around to a buyer's and then back around to a seller's.
Hmm.
Oftentimes it'll be a state like Texas, California, Florida is a big one typically. Once in a great while, one of the eastern states, kind of like New York, but not as often. Florida is often used as an indicator
Hmm.
of housing markets. So, for instance, Orlando, Tampa, Cape Coral, Lakeland, all those areas are big ones to watch. They appreciated on average over the years 53%, about 11% above the national average of 48%. So over the years, they grew the most. So
Hmm.
everybody knew to start watching Florida a while back. They're like,
Hmm.
usually who appreciates the most drops the most, and they're going to be the first indicator. So
Hmm.
now Florida, a matter of fact, if you look at MSN News, and I don't look at MSN News a lot for these kind of things, but they actually hit a lot of these numbers and assumptions on the nose from what I felt anyways. Is they actually say Florida is in trouble. Most Florida markets are in trouble, and there's going to be exceptions. But like Central
Hmm.
Florida and everything, that's on really rocky soil, no pun intended. Um, right now, there's a lot going on there in the market that's going to start to roll back into all of our markets soon.
Okay.
So that's a good news. That's the good news. Bad news is that takes time.
Hmm.
So unless we want a market crash like 2006 and 2007, prices coming down take time. So you're going to we've had 6 months already of people listing their properties for over 420,000 and then ending up selling it at, I forget the exact number. It was just under like 395,000 or 398,000, something like that.
Hmm.
So now what happens is houses will start to not appraise.
Hmm.
So somebody goes to buy a house and they buy it for 405,000 instead of the 420. They still think they're getting a deal. The appraiser comes in and says, "No, everything else out here is, sold for 398,000." So now the next time that agent lists a house in that area of the similar size, they're going to go, "Okay, 398,000." And that's the slow roll into getting the housing market back to somewhere reasonable.
Hmm.
And that takes time. And the
Hmm.
longer it sits and the bigger the market inventory gets, the better off we are.
Hmm. Yeah. And probably what adds to it as well. I mean, I'm just thinking the biggest lot of houses that we're looking to sort of break free into inventory are owned by boomers who are looking to sell their homes now and move into a retirement property. I think in a former episode we discussed how quite a few are realizing that it's not going to pay them, so they're kind of retiring in place and just doing, modifying their existing home. But for them, I mean, that generation, they're not under any financial pressure to reach a deal, to drop the price so that they can move. So I think that underscores what you were just saying, that it's not inventory that's easily going to be shaken loose. It'll take some time to get there.
Yeah, I think personally, I have given up on what they call the gray wave, which
Hmm.
is people of the boomer generation, which is, what is it, late 60s and 70s now,
Hmm.
um, of them selling mass amounts of houses. Because, like you said, they have no motivation to move. There's not going to be a big gray wave. They're going to leave their house to their kids or their family, and they're one of the last generations that had a quote unquote great pension, things like that. Um, I just don't think that's a possibility anymore. If it
Hmm.
is, it's going to come late and it's going to come weak.
Hmm.
You're
Yeah.
going to maybe have 1/5 of the boomers in 8, 9 years maybe start dumping their homes on the market, but it's going to be so trivial comparatively
Hmm.
to other market shifts.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One interesting thing I'm noticing in our area is most of the larger uh, or most of the construction taking place, if you were to do it by unit count, is high density construction. So we're
Hmm.
seeing a lot of apartments. I mean, they're luxury apartments. Their rental fees are in the upper. The lowest you would get is like 1,500 for a single bedroom, going up to over 2,000. For 2 or 3 bedroom apartments.
It's
And
actually
I
not
thought,
bad.
yeah, that's not terrible. But for home inspectors, that doesn't help because you're moving renters in one. If somebody's moving to Florida to this area, you probably trading renters in one place for renters in another place. Which doesn't help the transaction volume that's going to affect home inspectors. But it is an interesting trend. Like I'm quite amazed. Sometimes you'll see this massive swath of property being cleared, and it's high density that's going in. So I don't have anything statistically to back that up, just anecdotally from what I said anecdotally for the first time ever.
Hey, that's my favorite word. That and ubiquitous. That's a good word.
Ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous. It's a
Well,
fancy way of saying everywhere.
everywhere. Yeah. No,
Everywhere.
so
It's
it's
ubiquitous.
just it's a trend I've noticed, but um, it's just interesting. Depending on the local market that you're in, um, it's just interesting to watch to see what kind of construction movement you're seeing, so that you can know what type of inventory is going to be added in your area, and if that's going to actually trickle down to benefit to you as a home inspector or not. But
Well, and it's a multifaceted aspect when you talk about apartments and leased properties being in the market. Does that really cut into buyers? Not really. Most most people who are going to rent a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment at $2,000 to $3,000 a month are generally speaking going to be transitional families, either from or to a home. So somebody who just
Mm,
retired and wants to live in Florida for a while, they rent an apartment. Or a family that has a kid or two and is looking for a home. While they look for a home, they live in an apartment.
mm,
So typically, it's not going to affect the market like that. And I'm not worried about apartments, quote unquote, taking over the market, because while municipalities have big talk, like we need to make affordable housing for our residents, they typically do not like apartments going into most municipalities. That's why you'll
mm,
find developers have to fight tooth and nail in most municipalities to get apartments in there.
mm,
It's high density, like you said. So for one property where you might have had, one subdivision of 40 houses, now you're going to have an apartment building with hundreds of families in it.
mm,
So you have more people, so you need more police services, more fire services, more ambulance services. The tax rate per square foot isn't great. You're going to
mm,
need road infrastructure, power infrastructure. They really prefer to have communities.
mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm not overly worried about that. I look at, and going back to Florida, I look at like the villages in Florida. Used to be a retirement only community, and now they've actually branched off and they're building huge swaths of the villages, including in areas now for families.
Yep. Yep.
So those are going to be smaller properties, postage stamp lots, nice house. And I don't know why, but in Florida, you guys build your houses really close together. In my
You
area, they
know,
don't like
that
that.
is, yeah, it's funny. Most of the big developer properties, like I mean, we got um Dr. Seuss
Dr.
type
Horton,
Dr.
Dr. Dr.
Dr.
Dr.
Horton, here's
Horton.
a hoop. So we have a lot of those developments around, and those are, yeah, I mean, they're just a few feet apart. They're very, very close. But yeah, that seems to just be how they develop them in the larger developments. I think why I brought up the apartments is I know, especially for the Gen Zers who are looking to get into home ownership,
Mhm.
some of them a couple of years ago had sort of given up or put those plans on hold and stuck with renting for now. And obviously the hope was trying to shake some of those loose so that they would be able to move into home ownership. But you know, it's likely to be transitioning from renting to renting, as opposed to renting to home ownership. But in time, I think it's gonna get more and more favorable for them to be able to embrace home ownership. They actually, an interesting article I was reading the other day, Gen Z, more than any other nation, any other generation, are more tuned and educated and focused on wanting to be homeowners even earlier on, which I thought
Mhm.
was interesting. Even coming up with interesting ownership like concepts of being able to own properties together, co-buying properties together, stuff like that. So my assumption was, oh well, that the newer generation is not really interested in home ownership, but that was really wrong. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the market in the upcoming years. Gen Z is going to be moving in, and we probably will see some elevated transaction levels because of that.
Yeah, and even when we look at it now, we're talking kind of big picture, Gen Z and all that. But if we narrow it down to the next 3 months for Q3 of 2025, there's still good things happening for our home inspection market. So I have the benefit of seeing numbers and stats and knowing home inspection companies of all different sizes all over the US and Canada. Um, and many of them they'll be like, oh, yeah, here's my stats. It's like, oh, wow. But not getting personal about any of it, but things have stabilized. There's not mass exodus out of the home inspection industry anymore, which usually means that even the lower portion of our industry, new guys getting started, guys who do it part time, whatever, not that's the lowest, but you know what I mean. They're not like the big companies,
High producers, yeah.
high producers. Yeah, those are the
Mhm.
guys that are still hanging on. Whereas before, they were very quickly taken out of the industry, even just last year or even in Q1 of this year.
Mm.
bigger companies have taken more market share, so there's unfortunately been some market consolidation, which we predicted would happen. As people exit, bigger companies or smaller companies will take up that market share and wait for it to start producing again, and it has.
Mm-hmm.
So the good thing is the worst of it is over. And I'm really glad when we said that at the beginning of the year, we said that with a little bit of bated breath, kind of like, will it really get better? And it did. Is
Mm-hmm.
it through the roof? No. Do we want it through the roof? No, because we want it to stabilize and then get better overall.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit too, because something that we don't talk enough about in our quarterly outlooks is AI. So we all talk about AI, but not the concept itself or the ethics of it or anything, but how it affects our market outlook in Q3 and in general. Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on it, Bion?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I do think it's really encouraging that you see some light at the end of the tunnel for new entrants into the home inspection market. That's great, because that's kind of been a bit of a shutout for a while there. So that is great. As far as AI, um, maybe understanding what maybe makes the existing home inspection market nervous about the topic of AI or excited about the topic of AI. So I think we get excited about the topic of AI because we're like, wow, with AI, if my tools were fully AI enabled, I'd be able to increase my volume. I'd be able to do inspections faster, better. And that's obviously what we're looking to accomplish always, right? That's why we're always tuning our templates and our approach and all that kind of thing. So there are good things to come from AI, but I think some of the fears come in where they see some like app being demoed and somebody's literally walking around a house and AI is just kind of diagnosing everything and pointing out everything and logging all these defects and boom, no home inspector needed. And so maybe that would be along the lines of where folks would maybe like to dig in, like how close are we to the digital AI inspector, and does that mean that home inspector's role is going to be diminished in the market? Like, does it not? Why doesn't it? I don't know. Is that I'm trying to imagine what's going on, and that's what I'm imagining. Do you think I'm right on or a little
No,
off?
I think you're very much right, and I think what we're worried about is the singularity for our industry.
Mm-hmm.
The singularity being eventually it's going to hit a head,
Yeah.
and there's a couple different directions that it can go. What I'm happy about is AI tools to help us. So you know what? If I'm sending an email and I'm like, I think my email that I just wrote is even confusing me, am I going to pop it in a chat GPT and say, can you just make this clearer? Okay, cool. That sounds better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's always going to be an awesome tool. That's a very basic, example. It does amazing things, but I think what we're worried about is it taking our industry from us, and not it itself. See, we as humans like to go to extremes. We like to say AI could never take my job. AI can't crawl into the crawl space. AI can't walk into the living room and interact with the clients. No, but it can lower the barrier to entry into our industry
Mm-hmm.
significantly, and that's where the fear's at.
Mm-hmm.
We allay our fears by coming up with extreme examples. Self-driving cars could never do this. It's like, no, but it can do 90% of that, and that's what you should be afraid of,
Mm-hmm.
not the 10% that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So as an example that we've given in another podcast, the model that I worry about is some company like Inspectify, that kind of business model. And there are a few that have popped up recently. It's going, ooh, well, this should be easy now.
Mm-hmm.
They go in, they send in an unqualified person, but he doesn't need to be qualified. He's going to get prompts. He's going to walk around with a tablet, and the tablet's going to tell him eventually, hey, check under that table, push on the wall. How does that feel? Does that feel spongy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then this is likely the issue. Now do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it just follows prompts.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to get into the crawl space? No. But now that guy's going to have a little crawl bot. And, he's going to use a, remote control thing, and it's going to go through the crawl space. And, it'll have a little probe arm, and it'll poke things. And it's eventually going to get to that point. I don't think we're close to that. That's what I would call the singularity. I don't think we're close to that,
Mm-hmm.
but we're getting closer. And I think even some of the AI changes affect even Q3 and Q4 of just this year.
Mm.
So we were as far as I know, we were the first home inspection software company, Inspector Toolbelt, to incorporate AI into our app. And that was a year and a half ago, beyond
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
years ago, something
Yeah.
like that.
Almost 2 years. Yep.
Almost 2 years. So, and it was fantastic and awesome, and it's helped. And we actually just updated our model so that way it works even better. But there's other software that's incorporating it now,
Mm-hmm.
and we're part of the industry. I'm a home inspector. You know, people that work for me are inspectors. We're inspection industry, but there's also outside companies that are in our industry that want to create that model.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not making any accusations, but you know, that's when you come from the outside and looking in, you see an opportunity and not an industry that you care about.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, AI is going to water down the quality of a home inspection if it's taken away from home inspectors themselves. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. So as an industry, we're concerned about business being taken away from home inspectors. So
Mm-hmm.
let's analyze how that's going to be done. So for business to be taken away from a home inspector, it means that what we're effectively saying is that a home inspection gets done to the satisfaction of the client without the home inspector being included in the process. So what we're looking at then is a third party, either the prospective homeowner themselves are getting this app, whatever it's going to be, and they are walking around the house and doing their assessment, and AI is doing its thing and making its recommendations. So they complete this home inspection, this AI inspection using this tool, and either they get to a point where they're like, okay, yeah, I'm confident this is it. I'm good with this house or not good with this house. Um, or maybe the agent provides that service or points them in that direction. I don't know ethically what the
Well,
lines are there.
well, let me not to interrupt you real quick, but when I say an unqualified person, I'm talking about somebody who is licensed because licensing is not going away.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's licensed but not necessarily qualified. In New York State, it's a 100-question test and a 140-hour course.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't make you qualified. Some states you don't even need licensing.
Mm-hmm.
So they can get just anybody. Oh, they're like, okay, we'll get you qualified. You know, they send their 20-year-old apprentice to the program, and he gets his license, and then he just uses AI, and off he goes. I'm
Mm.
saying unqualified in that way. There's still going to be
Okay.
licensing, and some other models, depending on how you read the laws of some states and provinces,
Mm-hmm.
could hypothetically have a home inspector review the findings.
Okay.
So some states don't allow that. Some states require the inspector to be in person, but some don't explicitly say.
Hmm.
So now you could hypothetically have a home inspector sitting at his desk with 15 minions going around doing AI inspections, and he just checks the reports as they go.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So they're home inspectors. They got their license, but there's still a massive knowledge gap. But that knowledge gap is not so much of a problem anymore because they've got this AI tool that's closing that gap for them and
Yeah.
making them look good. Um, yeah, that's an interesting scenario. It reminds me of like years ago. I was working for a utility company, and we also had a situation where we had engineers walking out in the field to do field evaluations. So you actually had these high-paying, high-salaried engineers all out in the field assessing every single point and making annotations. And of course, it was accurate. It was great. But how do you scale that across a massive network? You can't. It's too expensive. So they literally before the era of AI, they created software that would prompt, based on if you capture this, if you say this is what it looks like, then we got more questions and more questions. Eventually, they would be hiring guys fresh from Dunkin' Donuts, put them through a week of training on the software, and they could go out and capture the information.
Mm-hmm.
And the engineers moved into the office. And so we only had like a few engineers, and all they did is just what you described. So um, it has happened in other industries. Will we see a shift like that in the home inspection market? it's probably inevitable, right? Um, unless we have legislation that blocks that kind of thing, or just bad results, bad experiences. But even that, in my argument, will probably disappear as the AI improves over time. So I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I don't think that. I mean, that's just one option. Some states already have things that prevent that business model from even happening.
Okay.
So a qualified home inspector has to be on site. And then there's also market antipathy, and there's another word like ubiquitous and anecdotal antipathy. So basically, it's almost like a repulsion for AI. So when somebody sends me AI content, I immediately, by nature, my brain rejects it because I'm like, you put no effort into that. It's AI. And they find that happening nearly immediately after AI came out. There was an immediate antipathy when it came to AI content. So I think the market itself is ultimately going to reject it. And already, even in the first half of this year, I've had inspectors even tell me, hey, I had an AI comment that I wrote and the client didn't like it because it sounded like AI wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are already like that, when trust level of AI is probably going to be at its highest,
Mm-hmm.
what's it going to be like in 6 months, a year, 10 years when people are just like, okay, what am I paying you for? I could have
Mm-hmm.
walked around with a tablet and done those things. And there's another thing to worry about is if we ever get into another market where people are skipping inspections, hypothetically in 5, 10 years, they could
Mm-hmm.
have an app that they could do their own inspection and do those same prompts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would it be legal? I don't know. There's got to be some legislation because nothing's stopping you from looking at your own house and finding problems as it is. You
Mm-hmm.
just can't call it a home inspection necessarily.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So, thinking of the trust levels of AI and how our sort of our tolerance of clearly AI generated content, we switch off right when we see it. But what we also have to admit is, and we're seeing, is that gap is being closed surprisingly fast
mm-hmm,
with newer models and the quality of the content that it's and in a relatively short period of time. I mean, it's only been like 2 leading on to 3 years that AI has been mainstream.
mm-hmm,
So we're probably going to continue to see that gap closing and closing, where eventually, to be able to distinguish between AI generated content and human generated content, it is going to be, that gap is going to be very minuscule. And I think eventually, in the talking in the broader technology landscape, we're going to reach a point where we as humans will almost feel a higher confidence in AI generated content over human generated content. It's an interesting theory that's taking place because right now we're seeing the mistakes, we're seeing the flaws, and we're like, oh, this is AI, this is junk, But as those models continue to improve, we're going to cross a threshold where we as humans, we're like, oh, look, this has got grammar mistakes. This was written by a human. Where I don't trust this, and it's crazy to think about now, but it's a kind of an ethical quandary and debate that's happening in the larger market as far as what the future looks like. Um, but anyways, why I'm bringing this up here is that right now, I agree with you. Right now, when we see AI stuff being generated, it's clearly just generic and it's throwing in stuff that doesn't apply. And I can't trust this, right? Especially when I'm buying a house and it's just throwing out generic stuff and it doesn't know. But as that AI continues to get more intelligent, that gap will continue to close. Um, but the interesting thing also to note is that in a lot of other industries, the entry level people in the industry are being not shaken out, but they're kind of being blocked entry. Like, for example, software developers in my industry. So a lot of junior software developers, they maybe have got their degree, they've got an internship, maybe a couple of internships. They're struggling to find a job because
mm-hmm.
the work that we would have given them is now taken care of by AI, and the more senior developers just are handing stuff off to AI to do the base level stuff, and they've got a barrier to entry. Um, to your argument, it brings in less qualified people who are also going to block those kind of folks who are more qualified but expect to be paid more but can't
Hmm.
offer more value than somebody with less knowledge but an AI tool, So um
You're
it
an AI tool.
yeah, it's this weird thing. It's this weird place. We kind of don't know. Is it going to impact? It is, How are we going to like insulate our business and ourselves from its impact? It's kind of hard to know. We just, have to see how this thing shakes out. But is there going to be impacts? Absolutely. And if you're saying, like you said at the beginning, oh well, you can't, AI is not going to shake the client's hand or crawl in the crawl space. Yes, that's true, but don't just dismiss it completely. It is going to impact the industry. We're probably a little ways from seeing the full insight into that impact and um, see what happens. But
Yeah, so I think your opinion is right over mine. I think you hit the nail on the head. But I do think whatever does happen, I think best case scenario is we as an industry adopt it more, and I think that's the only way to own it is to get through it is to own it. If we
absolutely,
own it, if we own AI, we utilize it, use it in our reporting, in our software, and our emails, and whatever we're doing. The more we own it, the less likely it's going to take over our industry. I don't think it's going to take over completely. I think it's going to meet somewhere in the middle and leaning more towards us still having our industry. I think the higher end companies and the mid range companies that offer good service are going to stay around. I think it is going to burn off the bottom of the industry.
yeah,
I think about it kind of like water treatment. You're always going to have Culligan in the area, and you're always going to have, these bigger individual companies, but it's going to burn off the smaller, you
yeah,
know, smaller companies that maybe weren't offering the best of services, maybe didn't adopt AI, maybe didn't, have a fancy looking report because they thought that I still know home inspectors that write handwritten reports. They're like,
mm-hmm,
people have always accepted that. I'm like, never before has that been going out of style even faster.
mm-hmm,
Even just a PDF report sometimes, and I'm going to get skewed on this, but even a PDF report is going out of style so fast for web reports. It's
mm-hmm.
not even funny. I mean, we look at the numbers, how many people look at a web report versus a PDF report.
Right,
It's nuts.
right,
So the market is changing. It requires us to change more than probably we're used to or are comfortable with.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I think this next 6 months to a year is going to be important for us adopting it.
yeah.
Because the next 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to start to see where the singularity is heading to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And every industry has been impacted by technological advances. Even our industry, even the home inspection industry. This is not the first time technology has made an impact. I mean, you just mentioned it, the transition from handwritten reports to digital reports. I mean, simple example. I'm even just thinking of roofers, right? There
Mm-hmm.
was a time where a nail gun was not a thing, right? Everybody just you hand nailed a roof. Every shingle was hand nailed, and there was a price for the job because of the time that it would take. There was a quality that a roofer prided himself in because every nail that he drove in by hand, and that shingle was good. But with nail guns came out, I mean, I wasn't there at the time. I wasn't a roofer, but I can imagine the guys were like, what do these cowboys think they're doing with these nail guns? It's not as good a quality job. But in time, how do you make money now as a roofer? It's all about speed. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about volume. Unless you are providing a specialty roofing service and you're putting down slate or terracotta tile or something like that. If you're just laying shingles, it's about speed. You got to get it done because that's what controls the price. So it's interesting. AI probably will lead the same direction, but I agree with you 100%. Try to find ways of using the technology, embrace it, because then as you see the nuances happening, as the industry starts changing, you're going to be ahead of it. You're going to be right at the cusp of it. And that adjustment will be small as opposed to now starting from the ground up. Like what is an AI? How do I plug this thing in? you're going to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of worries me too. I don't want an industry to be about speed.
Right.
I don't think any home inspector out there. We talk about being quote unquote faster when really we mean the vernacular we use is basically meaning efficiency. We don't want just speed, but unfortunately, that may be where at least part of the market goes to. Ultimately, I still think we have time, but not as much as I think other people, a lot of inspectors out there, are hoping.
Mm-hmm.
But to kind of summarize what we talked about, we kind of went on two different directions here. The first aspect, I think the next 3 months are still going to be good. Stable, not, not blow your brains out amazing, but it's going to be stable. It's going to be better. The mass exodus out of our industry for the most part is over. And I'm seeing new inspectors come in and able to get their footing
Mm-hmm.
in most markets. Again, this is very regional, but the regionality of it is getting less and less.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being like, hey, in this state or this part of that state, things are getting okay. Now the map is getting a little bit more one color, so to speak, of how things are going. So if you're into the market outlook, watch Florida. Florida is going to be an indicator of what's happening today in Florida. It's probably going to be most states outside of Florida is going to be our inevitable future in the next 6 months, I would say. And then watch 6 months ahead of Florida, and watch Florida and imagine you there in 6 months. That's about what I think it's going to be. But for AI, we brought that up because we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. We really have to embrace it more as an industry. I know a lot of guys are out there saying, who's not using it? A lot. There's a lot. I still talk with home inspectors that are like, yeah, I had to write a little song for my daughter's, birthday the other day. And it's like, well, okay, let's use it to analyze a complex, hydrostatic pressure issue in a basement, maybe. And,
Yeah.
really use it for something that's part of our industry. But would
Yeah.
you say that's a good summary or no, Bian?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it absolutely is. I agree on the take with the market. Ultimately, I think it's a positive report. With AI, I think it's interesting just hearing your thoughts and my thoughts, and I think it represents really just the reality is that we're kind of in an unknown time period. Is it going to impact? Yes. How much? How soon? We're not sure. We'll have to wait and see. But I
And
think,
in
yeah,
what way?
right. In what way?
We
Right.
still don't know.
Right.
Yeah, these are just guesses.
Right. But your advice is sound. We can't just bury our heads in the sand. We got to educate ourselves. And even if you can afford it, is growing your workforce, adding new inspectors who do know how to use it. So that um, you can learn from them and be able to do that. But yeah, we need to try to embrace it because we're going to be seeing it coming into all of the software in the next year, the next 12 months is going to be interesting. It's going to be everywhere. So we'll see what impacts it has.
It'll be ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous.
Well, Bian, thank you very much for being on the show. I love our quarterly market outlooks. They're probably our most popular series. And if anybody has any questions, let us know. But thank you all and see you next time on Inspector Toolbelt Talk.
Cool. Thanks, Ian. Always a pleasure.
Bye.